Hello there. My name is Angela Gifford, and on behalf of the Geriatric Emergency Care Applied Research Network Advancing Dementia Care, I am pleased to present our Community Review Committee training slides as updated per the request of the grant meeting last week. Some of the goals of this meeting are to review the research proposal evaluation process, to review the grant application materials, and to review the scoring rubric and its processes. Many of you are probably very familiar with our aims at these points, but to once again reiterate, GEAR 2.0 aims to improve the emergency care of people living with dementia and other cognitive impairments, focusing on the 4 research areas of the emergency department practices, detection of dementia within the emergency room setting, emergency department care transitions, and lastly, communication and decision-making in the emergency department. Pilot grant applications were submitted to the GEAR network and are being placed through a 2-part review process to assess which are eligible for grant funding and which are not. In the first round of the review process, the grants were sent over to a scientific review community. These individuals will evaluate the grants for sound scientific practices. In the second part of the grant review process, the community reviewers, which are you guys here reviewing the slides, will review the grants for sound research engagement. To go into a little bit more detail here, the scientific review committee members are part of the Emergency Medicine Foundation scientific review section. They'll review the grants following an NIH format, and the results of this review will be done in a simple score format for each grant and then will be passed along to the executive committee. The community review members will be taken from the GEAR 2.0 task force and the Health Equity Advisory Board. These members will review the grants and then will provide a result in the form of a score for each grant that will then be passed along again to our executive committee. The funding decision, which is the final phase of the pilot grant review process, will be based on the scoring and will be confirmed by the GEAR 2.0 executive committees to ensure that the best and most applicable grants are chosen for this very significant pilot project funding. A key thing to note as a member of the community review board is that you must be able to review all grants without any conflicts of interest. This means if a family, professional, or financial connection has applied for a GEAR 2.0 ADC grant, you cannot review it and you must refrain from taking part in the review. This does not mean that you are cut from any or all of the review process. It would just be the one you have a conflict of interest with. I'll pause here for questions. And again, you can always send questions along to Manish or myself at our emails. We're now going to move into the second phase of our goals for today, which is to review the grant applications materials and the items you will see while you are reviewing the pilot project applications. So reviewers are going to receive all necessary parts of the grant application. We will provide all parts if desired, and we have separated out all parts into these 3 categories of necessary, may or may not need, and not needed for review. You will receive everything under the necessary for review and the may need / not need columns, but you will not receive a budget, nor will you receive other forms of support. These have been again deemed not necessary for this portion of the grant review process, but if you would like them, you certainly are welcome to receive them. We're now going to go through each section piece by piece to showcase what each of these may look like when you are going in to review the grants. So to start, the cover page lists the title, the principal investigator, and other investigators that are a part of this project. Here's an example of a cover page of one of our applicants here. You can see the names, the institution, the grant category, the project title, and the amount of funding requested. Next, you will see a scientific abstract. The scientific abstract is a short, technical description of the project with rationale, aims, hypotheses, and methods. This will go into more detail about the project as a whole, but of course in a sort of succinct manner to give a snapshot of what they expect to achieve by performing this project. The layperson summary is very similar to the scientific abstract. It is a short, non-technical description of the project written so anyone, regardless of background, can understand the study. Here you can see an example of the layperson summary that would be going in conjunction with the pilot project examples we have shown to you thus far. You can see that, again, there's less technical jargon, but it is still describing the elements of the study in a way that anyone could understand what is going on. Next, you will see specific aims. These are the goals and expected outcomes of the proposed project. Here, you can see an example of the beginning of a specific aims paragraph. As well, you can see an example of a specified specific aim. There may be multiples of these throughout. They are oftentimes highlighted in this manner, again, so it is very easy to identify what they are intending to get or expect out of this proposed project if they are able to conduct it. Next, you will see the research proposal. This is the largest part of your pilot project application, and it describes why the project is important and what will be done. There are 3 parts to the research proposal, the first being the significance. This outlines why this project is important. Here you can see an example of the significance portion of the example research proposal from our example pilot project grant. Here they're talking about the importance of the problem being addressed for the Alzheimer's disease and related dementia community. The second part that you will see in a research proposal is the innovation part. This will describe what is new about their research proposal that hasn't been done yet in the field. So in this one, the innovation, or one of the innovation elements of the pilot project, is the inclusion of the persons living with dementia and care partner perspective in the role of developing an artificial intelligence for ED to community care transitions. The last part of a research proposal that you will see is the approach. This will describe how they intend to accomplish the aims and the strategy they intend to go about it. Here you see an example of the approach section from our example pilot project application. Here they are outlining preliminary studies or work already done prior to this that has informed how they are intending to describe the methodology or how they intend to use the methodology in their current study. Next, you will see a personal statement. A personal statement from an applicant will describe their interest in the study topic, their role in the study, and their past experiences that they feel the committee should consider while examining their pilot grant application. In this example, we see here the principal investigator describing some of their past training in their current career position and why they feel they should be funded for the research. The roles of the participants will be described next. These are the personnel, and it describes how they will be involved in the proposed project and how the team will work together as a whole. Here in our example outline, we see our principal investigator outlining their role as well as the roles of the key collaborators and co-investigators. Biographical sketches will come next. These provide information on key personnel research and training, and they will include statements on why they are suited to work on the project. In our example here, we can see Dr. Cameron Gettle's information, their position title, their education to this point, and again, you'll see a personal statement similar to the one previous that goes into more detail again about why they are apt for receiving this grant application monies. Next will be a resource and environment page. This describes the available resources, including lab, equipment, and expertise that are at or around their work environment. In our example here from Dr. Gettle, we see that he mentions the Yale program and on aging and the Pepper Center as some potential areas of equipment, expertise, and or lab areas that will help him to facilitate his pilot project. Next are the letters of support. These are statements from others that help to validate applicant's abilities as a researcher and how they commit to participate. In this example, we see a letter of support from individuals at Live Well and how they intend to support this pilot project and what their role will be in facilitating some of these AI elements. Next is the ethics section. This section will outline the risks and benefits associated with the proposed project. Here again, we see the beginning section example of the ethics or the risks to human subjects as related to the AI study here. That is our current example pilot project graphics we've been showing. I'll pause here so you can take any notes and questions. Again, if you have any, feel free to email myself, Manish Shah, Ula Hwang, or Jeff. Again, we are fairly responsive, and you should have our emails somewhere, hopefully, in your inbox. We are last going to review the updated scoring rubric and process. Note, this part is different from the one that you saw at the conference last Monday. This was the part we updated based on everyone's suggestions, and this will be the scoring rubric going forward for the review process. In general, the scoring rubric outlines what aspects of the grant should be considered. Please make sure when you are filling out your grant rubric to put in or fill in your name and the applicant or the PI's name right under yours. That way we can easily track which forms go to which pilot project applications. There are 4 sections in the scoring rubric. The first being relevance to the emergency care persons living with dementia, which it can be awarding up to a total of 10 points. The second being the ability of the applicant, study team members, and stakeholders to successfully complete the study from the perspective of the community reviewer. In this portion, there is a total of 10 points possible. And thirdly, there will be the considerations of issues related to inclusion of diverse participants in the research, as well as the potential of the research to enhance health equity. This scoring rubric section is worth a total of 10 points possible. Lastly, the protections for vulnerable populations, those being persons living with dementia and their care partner, are being addressed. In this last section, a total of 10 points are possible. Overall, there will be a total of 40 points possible, and this total will be automatically summed at the bottom of your fillable PDF. You do not need to worry about calculating any of these scores manually. Again, these will be automatically entered as you go and fill in the PDF through your scoring process. So here is question 1 from the scoring rubric. This focuses on the relevance to the emergency care of persons living with dementia. As you can see, there are 4 scoring categories here and 4 areas in which you can have some wiggle room to award points as you deem fit. 0 being no relevance to emergency care persons living with dementia, 1 to 3 representing a fair relevance to emergency care for persons living with dementia, but the ones that are described or the relevance that is there is vague or poorly described. There 4 through 7 category is an application with good relevance to emergency care persons living with dementia, and an application that receives a score of 8 through 10 has been deemed to have excellent relevance to the emergency care of persons living with dementia and is deemed to have a significant long-term impact on the community. But when considering the grant applications, please keep in mind the consensus conference rankings. Do think about, does this application address a research priority that was ranked highly by the stakeholders? That will help to ensure that the relevance aspect of the grant is being kept in mind, as relevance was a key element of the rankings and the ranked voting system that we did at the consensus conference last September. Question 2 focuses on the ability of the applicant, study team members, and stakeholders to successfully complete the study from the perspective of the community reviewer. Again, we have scoring groups of 0, 1 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 10, which should allow you some wiggle room to score as you deem fit. A score of 0 would mean that the applicant, team members, and stakeholders are unlikely to successfully complete the study based on how it is described in the pilot project application. A score of 1 to 3 indicates that the applicant, team members, and stakeholders are likely to complete much of the study, but they may do so with major difficulties. A score between 4 and 7 would indicate that the applicant, team members, and stakeholders are likely to complete the study, but there is room for improvement based on the description that was provided in the pilot project application. A score of 8 to 10 indicates that the applicant, team members, and stakeholders will easily and successfully complete the study, and this will set themselves up for long-term success. We also leave space here for comments, anything that you may deem relevant to consideration in addition to your numerical score. This can be filled in here. While evaluating the grant applications, please consider how significant of an impact would be receiving the grant have on persons living with dementia and their emergency care. And do think about, does the applicant's previous experiences set them up for success in obtaining future grant funding for research? For question 3 of the scoring rubric, we are focusing on these considerations around issues related to the inclusion of diverse participants in research, as well as the potential of the research to enhance health equity. Again, we have the scoring groups of 0, 1 to 3, 4 to 7, and 8 to 10. Again, this should allow you some wiggle room and picking out a score that you feel is most fit based on the categories described. A score of 0 would indicate that the application does not consider inclusion of diverse participants and issues related to health equity. A score falling between 1 and 3 would indicate that the application poorly considers inclusion of diverse participants, as well as the issues related to health equity. A score of 4 to 7 would indicate that the application considers inclusion of diverse participants and issues related to health equity, but again, there is some room for improvement based on the description provided in the pilot project application. A score of 8 to 10 would indicate that the application thoughtfully considers inclusion of diverse participants and issues related to health equity. Again, there is room for comments underneath the scoring chart to allow you to better describe or explain your scoring, as well as to keep any notes that you may have while completing your scoring process. When considering community engagement, do think about, how does the applicant intend to engage community stakeholders? As well, does the applicant outline how they are going to promote community involvement beyond 1 year? And lastly, how will the study protocol impact the community of people living with dementia and their care partners? This will help to ensure that we are staying in the guidance of that question and those elements that are deemed very vital to a very strong pilot project application that will go on to be a much larger NIH-funded study. Lastly, question 4 considers the protections for vulnerable populations, those being persons living with dementia and their care partner, and how they are addressed in the pilot project application. We have the similar scoring groups of 0, 1 to 3, 4 to 7, and 8 to 10. Again, allowing for some wiggle room so you can give a score as you deem fit. A score of 0 indicates that protections for vulnerable populations are not accounted for in the grant application. A score between 1 and 3 would indicate that protections for vulnerable populations are incompletely accounted for, meaning there are some there, but there's also many that are missing. A score of 4 to 7 indicates that protections for vulnerable populations are adequately accounted for, but there is room for improvement based on the description provided in the pilot project application. Lastly, a score between 8 and 10 indicates that protections for vulnerable populations are well accounted for in this grant application. There is a comment box where you can provide further input and keep notes again while you are reviewing the grants for each one. And this shall help you to, again, facilitate your scoring review. When reviewing the risk and benefits of a study, do consider, do the benefits of the proposed study outweigh the potential risk that are placed upon the community? And would the level of risk impact the person living with dementia and or their care partner's day-to-day life? In short, impeding and making day-to-day life somewhat difficult and beyond. I'll pause here so you can take notes on any questions you may have based on the descriptions of the scoring rubric provided. Again, feel free to email those to Jeff, Eula, myself, Angela, or Manish. Lastly, before our next grant review meeting in May, you will submit your scores and comments for each of the grants under review. We will then provide you either paper or electronic forms, whichever you prefer. At this point in time, a majority of you have indicated electronic forms, and we plan to send you all electronic forms of the PDFs to be filled out and the grant applications. If you would like to have a paper form, please just let us know via email. This can be sent to myself, Angela, or to Jeff, and we will certainly sort that out and we can send you a paper form as you would like. When we have our grant review meeting in May, the Gear 2.0 ADC leadership will summarize each of the grant applications. The Gear 2.0 ADC leadership will then help to facilitate a discussion on each of the 4 questions for each grant. Then the Gear 2.0 ADC staff will take notes on the discussion, and at the end of our discussion, each community review grant participant will assign an overall grant score of 0 to 10, with 10 being the best and 0 being the worst. I'll give space for questions if you have them. Again, please feel free to email those to Manish, myself, Eula, and or Jeff. If there are no other things or questions at this time, I thank you for your time and for listening. And I look forward to seeing you all in May at our review meeting.